everybody to the brand spanking new Mise-En-Sesh podcast. I'm Elliot, he's George, and we are two film production graduates. We studied together at university. We graduated a couple of years ago, and since we've not got much to do during this whole lockdown pandemic thing, we started a podcast because
we're cool like that.
Because that's as close as it gets to making movies right now.
That's pretty much all we can do at this point.
Yeah.
You know, got to put all this film gear we've got to use.
Yeah, nothing screams graduate film student like investing like hundreds of pounds into all this gear just to sit there in your office and not do anything.
So I can light up the back of my scene properly. Yeah. That's why.
You're going to win the best cinematography award for your household.
So, what did you put your DSLR to use for over the pandemic? I used it as a glorified webcam. It's great.
What's even better is when you get the follow-up call from the university. I got it in the summer, and it was like, "Oh, what are you doing now?" Like the people from university, it was like a survey thing. They're like, "Is your degree being useful?" And what are you doing now? I was like, "Well, sitting inside on Skype. That's what I'm doing with my degree right now."
I feel like a lot of people, like I'm pretty sure everyone in our scenario is doing that. But you've got the one. I think we both know who I mean. Like the one guy who's somehow got his foot in the door and he's actually doing quite well for himself. But then everyone else is here like, what? Do I have to compete with that? Like, do I need to? Yeah.
There's always a guy who knows a guy who knows a guy who gets the guy a job.
He's somehow working with Spielberg because his dad knew the carpenter who worked on this show, who lived next to the. Yeah. If only.
Well, it turns out his granddad was actually the one who accidentally crashed the Titanic. So, and Spielberg was a big fan of his work.
Knew Cameron. You got Cameron on board, you know.
Oh, sorry, it was James Cameron who did Titanic, wasn't
it? Yeah, come on, you call yourself a film student.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so this podcast, in case you haven't realised it yet, because we've done a good job, this podcast is film production centric. You know, we talk about films that we like, and we talk about the process of making films, and it's just a good way for us to, well, one, for me and George to keep in touch and talk about, you know, film centric stuff, but also to you, several of you watching, maybe, hopefully, be a way to have sort of a back and forth and be able to just talk about different ideas and talk about different aspects of film whilst we're all stuck indoors, not being able to go out and actually do it. For now.
Yeah. It's one of those things that, yeah, like you say, this gives us a reason to keep in contact. It gives us something to talk about. I'd like to think we both know something about film. I mean, well, like you say, we do have degrees in it, so we, probably should know something.
Hang on, there we go. That's
oh my god, you actually got it there.
That's the most me thing ever. It's in a frame, but it's.
Hold on, have I got mine somewhere? I've got it somewhere.
Nothing says University of Lincoln film graduate than having your certificate in like a frame, but it's dodgy and off centre. I'm going to go ahead and put this somewhere where you can see it, so just so everyone knows that I'm a credible source of information, but apparently not a credible source for information on how to hang up certificates.
I genuinely thought I'd lost my degree for a second.
Actually, I'm just going to sit here and do the entire podcast with the degree cradled in my arm like this.
Just, unfurl this in the background. Yeah, I've got this bit of paper. What have you got?
Like, whenever we come in with like a hot take on something, we'd be like, university approved.
Verified.
Oh no. I held it too close to the camera. Everyone might have seen my actual grade that I got. Anyway. Right, before we go off on another on another tangent, we'll get into our very first talking point. Slate 1, take 1. Nice. So the first thing.
Slate somewhere. I can't remember what
Yeah, we'll slate every single talking point in case we have to do it again.
Sounds good.
Yeah, so the first thing that I want to talk about, we kind of already have already, but it's how I think we've got an interesting point on this, but I'll get into that later. But it's how the whole pandemic slash lockdown limbo state has impacted your creativity as a filmmaker. Now, like in my personal situation, like I was still at uni doing my masters when pandemic started, so it's like I've not really had a chance to get sort of going with the whole filmmaking thing. So mine's a bit more, you know, flat bounce in that regard. But for you, like you left uni, 2019 when you graduated.
Yeah, so we graduated September of 2019. In the May, May is when I actually finished the course. I then did 2 weeks of work experience with ITV, where I worked on The Voice for 2 weeks. I was just in the offices doing a bit of paperwork, and actually, funnily enough, I actually started doing a bit of casting. So, I got experience as a casting casting assistant.
That's cool.
And one of the guys who I discovered actually made it into the live shows.
Really?
So that was quite an interesting thing. I can't remember his name, but yeah, I discovered him on YouTube, and I was like, oh, he'd be quite cool. I put him forward, and he was brought in.
So he owes everything to you.
You're welcome.
You're going to track him down in like 10
welcome.
years when he's become like successful.
Yeah, so I did that. No, I think he was booted off in like the first couple of weeks, but it's fine. So I did that, and then I got the odd job with ITV, doing just runner work, and then I got my first credited work as a production runner, again with ITV, on the show In for a Penny, where maybe years down the line I will talk about my experiences on this show, because I had a lot of great experiences. I also had some where it's like the dark side of the industry, in terms of it's not really the advertised things. If you say to someone, this is why you want to go into the industry, these are the points which aren't mentioned. It literally got to the point where one day I was fighting back tears because I had someone screaming in my face. Like, that's how bad it got on that point. So I've had very mixed experiences coming out of uni. 9 times out of 10, everything has been gravy. But yeah, I've had my moments.
So how's that been for you? Because obviously you left uni and you've had a chance to sort of start picking up work and get into the groove of things. Then how has it been for you, like creatively or just even professionally, going from, being able to sort of look ahead and sort of plan your jobs and sort of pick up work here and there, to then going into, pandemic.wav and just having everything go flat?
Yeah, so I did work experience coming out of uni, and then because I did that, it led to other stuff. So from May until about August, I had somewhat consistent work. In terms of the longest period of time I didn't have any form of work was about 2 weeks. And I was like, oh, this is great. Okay, if this is how it's going to be, that's amazing. And then it got to August, which is when my production runner role ended with ITV. And I was like, right, well, I've been production runner. Obviously, everyone's going to pick up me because I'm great. I've done this. I've worked with ITV. I'm going to be honest, no one cares. Like, I had about 3 credits to my name. For those of you who don't know, a credit is what you've worked on. So for me, I was a runner, production runner. I've been an editor, a camera assistant. Like, it's whatever roles you've had, different jobs kind of thing. So you can't be a runner and sort of location assistant in the same thing, and it can't be 2 separate credits. Essentially, a credit is whatever job you've had. That was probably way more complicated than I needed it to be, but whatever. So I had 3 credits to my name, and at this point, I got very big-headed because I was suddenly like, I don't need to be applying for your basic runner work. Oh no, I can go straight into applying for production runner and researcher, maybe even like producer roles. And obviously, like looking back on it now, what, over a year later, I'm like, that was dumb. I could have applied for so many different roles and probably would have got at least one of them, but I didn't because I believed that being a production runner meant I had skipped that sort of step of being a runner for multiple years before then progressing up. I was like, yeah, it's cool, right? I've done that. I can move on up. I remember actually having a chat with my mum because she was like, "What are you going to do now?" And I said, "Well, I'll be a production runner. Like, I don't need to worry about being a runner. I've done that. I've progressed past that stage." Um, and that came back to bite me on the arse horribly because I didn't apply for such a what, like I applied for a very select few roles. October to December of 2019, I don't think I had more than about 2 days of work
Really?
or like two jobs. Yeah, I think I had a couple of instances with ITV again because I'm on their books. So it's like whenever a show comes up and they need, day runners, they'll contact me. So I was on their books. I had like a couple of days with them on like auditions for The Voice, the next series, or on this new show they were doing or whatever. But I really fell into a rut of like I don't know what I'm doing now. I don't have work coming in. I don't have money. In my head, by the age of like 23, I would have moved out and I would have had my life sorted. Um, and then we sort of sat there in the room I grew up in from the age of like 10. To be sat there like I don't have a job. The hell am I meant to do? And I refuse to go back into hospitality. I did 5 years in the hospitality trade, working behind bars and in restaurants. I refuse to go back into it just because I know I'll get comfortable. I'll be like, oh, I've got this money coming in, it's fine. I don't need to worry about applying for other jobs, and I'll just sit. I know I will. But it got to the point I was so desperate for a job. I was like, oh, I'll take this. I'll do whatever. I'll apply for anything. And I gave myself until the end of the year. And I was like, right, come 2020, if I haven't had anything, I will just go out to any restaurant nearby and just hand in a CV. I'm just like, I'm desperate at this point. Then when was it? The 28th, I want to say. The 28th of December, so 2019, I got a phone call. And it was a guy saying, hey, we're looking for editors. Would you be able to do like a trial for us? Someone will be in contact with you in a couple of days. They'll send you over the footage. If you could piece together a narrative for us, that'd be great. So I got the footage through on the 31st. So obviously New Year's Eve, got it through, and then I turned it around and sent it back to them on the 1st. I didn't get too drunk because I knew I had to edit this thing. Like I was that sort of determined of like I will forego this New Year's Eve. I still got rather drunk, it was fine, but I will forego this New Year's Eve because I want this job. So I did that. I got the job, which was great, and then for about 3 months I was working for these guys, and then yeah, it was about 3 months because I started working for them on the 1st of January 2020. Little did I know at this point, but my hell of a year started literally on the 1st of January when I started this job, because it was just everything kept going wrong. Like there were so many red flags popping up in terms of I'd get delay in payment. They changed the terms of like originally it was I'd get paid per video, and then it was I'd get paid per day, but they expected me to do multiple videos in a day. And because it's like the first job I've had in so long, I was like, yeah, it's fine. There was never any contract given. I didn't have any form of paperwork. The only things I had were emails. And then the pandemic hit, so we put everything on pause. So this was like it was just like mid-March. Everything sort of went into lockdown, so I worked from home for about a month. Then they just put the whole thing on pause, and they were like, right, we're not doing anything more. So from about April till late June, I hear nothing from them. I then get a phone call very late June saying, why are all these videos unfinished? We expect you to have finished them And long story short, I did extra work for them, expected to be paid, and now what are we? Mid-January 2021, and they still owe me money. Yeah,
So
I've
it's
had
been
my
about like
fair.
9 months.
Yeah, it's literally got to the point where they like if it wasn't the I don't want to go into how much it is, but essentially, if it was like 100 quid, I'd have just gone. You know what? I don't care. It's too much effort to progress it at this
Yeah,
point. But for the amount they owe me, I'm like, I could do with that. I've worked for it. You said you pay me. I need that money. So yeah, for about 9 months, it's just been a constant battle to try and get it.
yeah.
But yeah, so flash forward to today, and I've had a couple of jobs. I did camera assistant for the second part of 2020 for a couple of different projects. But I think, like most people, I've just been struggling. Like this industry, suddenly it just shut down. Like most places, everything just shut down. Like nobody had work. Like obvious, like say my mum was able to work from home. She said she just set up a laptop, like made a little office for herself. Um, but then for me, it was like suddenly I don't have a job, and it doesn't look like there's going to be one for the foreseeable future. So I feel like a lot of people have found themselves in that scenario where they're so unsure about what the hell's happening. Because I was very fortunate in terms of I walked into that 2 week work experience with ITV. Like I applied for it, and I had to put in an application, sort of answer questions and stuff. But I was very very fortunate with that, and the timing couldn't have been better. So that then gave me what's that, like 7 months of work experience on my resume, like on my CV. And then you've got people who've just come out of uni September 2020, and they're like, I can't work, I can't put a CV together,
Yeah.
so I can't apply for jobs, and I can't do this, I can't do this, and they've got no experience. And it's we timed it perfectly for graduating because we had that window of opportunity. But yeah, it's like most graduates at this point. It's a struggle to find any form of work, let alone long term work. But yeah, I don't know, because like how have you found it?
Well, like again, my personal experience of it doesn't. I suppose it doesn't really fall into the exact sort of because I left uni. Obviously, I graduated the film and TV course same time as you, but obviously I stayed behind at uni to do my masters. So in that time that you were taking up those jobs and accumulating that experience, I was still at uni, not worrying about it, having a great time for the most part. And then obviously towards the end of my master's course, actually, I started getting back in the zone of wanting to make films and getting back into that sort of mindset, because I think it's a mindset you have to work in like the film industry, because it's not like a lot of other industries where you can just sort of say, oh, okay, I'm going to apply here and do this and do that, and that's it, that's my job. Film is much more like you have to, before you can even think about applying, you have to do work. You have to have films to your name that you can say, I know how to make films, before you can even get like entry level jobs. And then pandemic, lockdown, and then like the master's course that came to an end at the start of the summer, and then it started thinking about, okay, like when is it going to be that I can sort of, like, for example, when we were at uni in our like second and third year together, when we were there, obviously rules are a little bit different because it's at uni, but when we were there, if you had an idea for a film or something, just even a shot you wanted to experiment with, you could message someone from your course, or you could message someone that you knew nearby, and within the hour you could be out somewhere, experimenting with a shot or talking through a script or even making a film. That's how quick it was. Whereas now, like one of the ways it hit me biggest with lockdown especially is the fact that no matter how much work you do, you sat at home in your office or your bedroom, wherever you are, you can't really see a future where you're actually out there doing it because everything's just stopped. So for me, it just completely just nosedived my like productivity like tenfold, because everything, like, I remember I used to write scripts fairly frequently, relatively speaking. I could sit down with my laptop and I could write an idea out, I could write a script out, and I could just do it. I could get it turned around in a few days just to, because that's just what I could do. And then as soon as that barrier of lockdown, pandemic rules, don't talk to people, don't mix with people, don't see people, that's how you make a film. You go out and you talk to people, and you mix with people, and you do stuff like that. So everything that I did, I just felt like it was to no end. It was a bit pointless. So, like, for me as a filmmaker, the first few months of lockdown, I just completely slumped into like a don't even bother, just binge Netflix, and just, yeah, that's what happened to me in the first bit of lockdown.
Yeah, I feel like, I don't know, for the first couple of weeks, I was like that, in terms of, I was like, I don't know what is happening, because as far as I'm aware, nothing like this has happened within like my grandparents' lifetime, let alone our lifetime. So to suddenly be like, well, I can't socialize with people, because when was it? Last time I saw you was February,
Yeah, it was like
February of
end of
2020,
February. Yeah.
or like early March or something. Yeah. So it's like I haven't seen you in almost like a year. It's mad to
Yeah.
think about. But
What's funny is, like, we had that, you came up to visit me at uni. It was me, you,
yeah,
uh, two guys, Caleb and James, who were also film graduates in our class. They came out for a night out together, and we had a lovely hungover brunch together. And that sort of thing ended like, okay, yeah, cool, yeah, see you soon. Yeah, we'll definitely make something. We'll get together and make some films in the summer, something like that. And now it's just,
and
and now
then
it's like 11 or 10 or 11 months later, and here we are on Skype, because that's as close as we can get to making something together.
yeah. Well, it's yeah. It was literally, yeah. Like, right, okay, I'll see you guys in like, a month or so. Like, I'll see you in a few weeks. Yeah, We'll put something in the diary. Flash forward 2 weeks. It's like, right, global lockdown. Sick. Awesome. Can't leave the house. I don't know, that I really respect the people who have turned around and made projects based around lockdown. Like, the amount of people who have made films where it's now portrayed via
Yeah.
a webcam. It's like, what is the film called? I can't remember what it is, but it's all done via webcams. And it's like a horror film where they summon a spirit, and it's one
Oh,
by
is
one
that
they'll get picked off.
Unfriended? Is that what it's called? Yeah.
No, it's
Yeah.
like that, but it was done. It
Okay.
was
Yeah.
filmed during lockdown, like the first lockdown. Um, and yeah, it's one of those things of, they've looked at this scenario and gone, right, how
Yeah.
can we benefit off this? Whereas I looked at it and went, yeah, I just get to sit inside and play games all day, sick. But they've obviously looked at it and gone, right, we can be productive. Because what was it? We're in lockdown 3 now. Is that it? Lockdown 3. Because it got to the point after. Was it before? It was. I think it was before lockdown 2, wasn't it? I don't know. I think it was before lockdown 2. We were discussing about, meeting up and
Yeah.
making something together, and then lockdown 2 happened. It was like, well, cool, right? I guess I'll see you in like 10 months' time. Sick. But yeah, it's one of those things where some people have been able to benefit from this, because what's his name from what is it, Riverdale?
Oh yeah.
KJ
Yeah.
Apper.
He's
AJ Apper. KJ Apper. What is his film called? It's like
all right.
Songbird. That's it. And this is a film by Adam Mason. Can't say I've heard of him. Whoops. No. Okay. I thought it was by someone else. I think it's like produced by Michael Bay or something. Yeah, producers Michael Bay. That's it. And it's the fact that even big shot producers and directors such as Michael Bay have turned around and gone, right, how can we do something from isolation? And it's like
Yeah,
that's
that's
pretty
cool.
cool.
I think that's one of the like. There's a lot of benefits to having like an established network of people and having like an established sort of workflow before we go into something like this. Like, if we were, say, for example, we were still at uni, studying film together, and this happened. So let's say all this happened in like 2019 when we were still at uni together. I'd imagine we'd probably done very much the same thing. But like, we'd left uni, and all of our course mates, all the people that we would usually call upon to do stuff, um, everyone's just, we're all together in uni, and then we're just spread out all over the country. So now yeah, it's much
Yeah.
bigger. It's a much bigger deal to do something anyway. But then,
Yeah, because it's not as if I can just sort of say, "Oh, you're right, mate. Like, I live around the corner. I'll just pop round. We'll run some ideas off each other, and we'll go out and film something." It's now like, right, okay. I'll put something in a diary. I'll spend like 2.5, 3.5 hours driving up to see you for like the social distancing thing that we can have. It's
yeah,
just not as easy anymore. Regardless of lockdown, it's the
yeah,
distance makes it a lot more difficult to just say, "Do you want to meet up and just run an idea by
yeah,
each other?" We have to do it via Skype, or we have to do it via like a Facebook message or something. It's
yeah.
not as
Like,
easy.
and it's not as
But what?
easy, and it's
Yeah,
definitely not impossible. But there's no
not
substitute for
impossible. No.
just sort of being in a room together and just just being able to bounce off each other and work on stuff. Like, how many times do we meet up at uni, and when we went into some like empty seminar room and just talked about the project that we were working on at the time, and just being able to just walk around and experiment with like shots and angles and stuff like that. Just being able to do that, which is a huge part of filmmaking, is physical. I mean, you can't do the physical part; it becomes really difficult to motivate yourself. I think, anyway. That's
No, definitely. It's one of those things when you're in a room together, like you can bounce energy. Like the energy
yeah,
builds and you both get, really into it. You can both yeah, like you can pick up a camera and just mess around. Like you just pick up your phone and you're like, right, if I framed it like this, if I did this, like but then over Skype it's like, right, okay, well if you imagine that the camera's over there and
yeah,
imagine this is what it's seeing, it's not as easy and it's a lot more yeah. I don't know. But what is reassuring is that films are picking back up again because in America, I don't know how it is in America. In Canada, so like Vancouver and stuff, where a lot of shows are filmed, they picked back up and things have been going since like I think July. I think solidly shows have been going. Um, so it's nice to know the industry is picking back up and jobs that are now popping back up again, which is quite nice. I literally got an email through a couple of hours ago saying, "Are you available for work?" And I've had to turn around and go,
and forward that email
"No."
straight to me.
Yeah, but it's nice to see that things are happening again. Like it's not completely shut down to the point where we do have to think about changing
Yeah,
career paths. Because that, like going back to my point earlier in terms of I hadn't had work for about 4 months, and it was so disheartening. So I was like, have I messed it up? Have I lost my chance to, get job after job after job after job? And realistically, that was never going to happen. Nobody walks out of university and just walks straight into a job in this industry. I don't know about others, but in this industry, you're not going to walk straight into a job and then just glide on through until retirement. It's not going to be that simple. And I feel like half of the satisfaction of a job is knowing that essentially you had to like
yeah.
fight for it. Or that's how I found it anyway.
It's like bringing up how, like,
I don't know.
yeah, the film industry is back up and running, because obviously they've made the adjustments to the way they do things, and now they can do it in a sort of a COVID secure way for the most part. And in the UK, at least, I know
Mm.
film production is allowed to continue throughout lockdown, so that's good news in that regard. But who I really feel for, and well, I suppose I'm included in this bubble, is the people who they've not established themselves as professionals yet. So the people who still need to get around, to gather people together, friends or whatever, from the people from the local area to make their own projects just to be able to pad out their CV or their resume enough to get those jobs. Because now, like, say for example, I had this great idea. It's not like I'm not a film studio, so it's not like I can say, okay, we're going to do this with X amount of money and COVID secure and all this stuff. And now it's a point where if I wanted to say, for example, in my local area, I'm in the local filmmakers Facebook group where everyone can sort of post ideas or connect with people. And now, because doing it sort of that way, it's too casual to be considered professional film production. It still comes under the bounds of, like, you shouldn't be mixing with people. So now it's like film can still happen in those sort of upper levels, but when it comes to like the lower levels, we're still restricted by the whatever the lockdown rules are in your area. Obviously, everyone's locked down now, but before it was also an issue of like, this guy's in tier 3, this guy's in tier 2. Oh, there's someone over there in tier 1, and how they're all, the rules are different for everyone in those tiers. So it's anyway, yeah.
Well, just thinking about that actually, because obviously we've walked out of university, and at university we have access to, none of it's top grade, but we have access to a lot of equipment. And it's like, if we wanted to use, like a jib to get this really cool shot, or we wanted to use a Steadicam, or like, I don't know, like maybe not a drone. I don't think the university stretched to a drone. But it's like we have access to all this equipment, which obviously we can't afford off our own backs. I just remember that the Corridor film, which I told you about, and it was literally based on the fact I'd got this new gimbal and I wanted to do one cool shot with it, and I tried to process a whole film based around that one idea. I was like, yeah, right, cool, okay, I can, like you say, put it out on like a Facebook group and then see if people will be interested in doing it. I'll say that it's a very low budget film and that, I can cover like food and stuff. Like I pay out my own pocket for like, pizzas for a couple of days. That's fine. And then when you get an actual producer involved who's like, right, okay, so how much budget do you have? 250 quid. Okay, and where are you planning on getting the rest of the budget?
What budget?
What do you mean? Well, like a small film for like, like a 5-minute short, you're probably looking at about a £5,000-10,000 budget. Excuse me? Eh? Yeah, you need to rent all this equipment. You need to pay people. I've got a DSLR. I've got a couple of cheap lenses. I've got this like little light I can use. Yeah, it's eye-opening. That scenario was. It was really eye-opening because I felt so much pressure to come up with a concept that was worthy of raising money. Spoiler alert: never got to any later stage in production. It ceased at that point. But yeah, I felt so much pressure because I was like, I don't have this money. I've never had to justify needing money to make it, because obviously at the university, if we spent any money on it up to a certain point, you'd get reimbursed. I think it was like £50 or something. And obviously for a student film, £50 will take you a long way. You just go to a charity shop for like less than a tenner. You've done all the costumes. You go to like Wilco or something, you've got all your props, like 50 quid amongst, like what, between 5 of you, over 200 quid. You can do a lot with that. In reality,
in the real world,
what is it? I think a small, there's a film budget, because there's a whole thing about what levels of film budget there are. So a microfilm is 500,000 to $1 million.
That's a micro budget.
That's the budget.
So if that's micro budget, then what the hell is like doing one for like 100 something quid? Like we did our third year film at uni for like 250 quid, I think, all in.
I don't even think it was that.
We managed to raise 150 on the GoFundMe thing, but then we obviously had to pay for things. But bringing up that shot, that Corridor film that you talked about a second ago, is that I remember you got in touch with me, and that film was based, or that film came from the need to sort of necessitate just this one shot that you wanted to do. And like in a normal world, you could be like, hey, what are you doing on Thursday night? I've got this cool idea for a shot. Do you want to meet up and do it? But oh yeah, cool, no worries. Me, you, maybe another friend, do it, easy. You could even make a short film out of that if you're smart enough about it. But in this new world, you have to do everything sort of to a higher level, and it's sort of taken away that grassroots level of play that it's just not there anymore. But with all this said, we'll stop being down on the film career because of the pandemic, because that is not going to last forever. Hopefully, maybe.
Hopefully not. Yeah. I mean, what is it? They've got the vaccine.
Vaccine's rolling out. So give me it. Shoot that.
Yeah, I think I get my first jab.
You're high up the list, aren't you? Because of nice.
Yeah, diabetes
perks.
Yeah. Upgrades, people.
Like Cyberpunk, where you're upgrading yourself with different modules to get the vaccine. Yeah,
just injections.
But yeah, that's not forever. But like you said, a lot of people have found ways to do things within the rules of lockdown, whether it's making films on webcams or something like that. That's something I'd pose to you: is that have you changed the way you do things, or have you changed the way that you think about making stuff? Whether it's short films, whether it's YouTube, whether it's whatever podcast like this, has that changed since the pandemic and the lockdown happened, or is that just sort of something that's like, are you on pause, or have you adapted a lot of things? Like, has it changed your mindset?
As in my approach to like the production?
Well, it's in any way, outlook or any sorts, like.
It's definitely made me appreciate how much opportunity we had at university. Like, it's definitely shown me we had all the freedom. We could do this. We could do this, and then, fortunately, I was given many experiences on live shoots. So I was in a studio on a couple of things, I was on location on others, I was in an office, I was I had a lot of different experiences within production. And then flash forward a year and it's everything takes place behind a screen, unless you've been isolating for 2 weeks before, and then you've had a COVID test, and then you've gone and done this and you've done that and you've done XYZ. It's not as simple as just saying, are you free on this day? Sick, right, meet us here and we'll go ahead. There's so much more that goes into it now, and it is one of those things you took for granted because it just didn't make sense for it to be taken for granted. I don't know how else to put it. Like, because there was no reason to be afraid of just meeting up and doing something.
Yeah,
we could just do it without thinking twice. I think the most thought I put into something was, how long is the drive, and realistically, am I going to be able to do a 3-hour round trip after working for 12 hours? Like, I didn't need to worry about wearing a mask all day or making sure to distance myself from people. But yeah, then today my biggest worry is, am I going to have work? It's like, I've got a job lined up, and it's a thing of, I need to hope that I don't catch coronavirus, because if I do, that's it. That job is gone, and I will lose that opportunity. So that's terrifying. Like that's one of those things that, again, before it's like, if I'm ill, I could turn up to work with a cold and I just say, I'm really sorry, I've got a cold. Like, just I'll keep to myself, but I'll do my work. Whereas now it's like, you've got coronavirus, stay the hell away. Like, you're not allowed on set. And that's what's disheartening, yeah. But yeah, what about you? Like, have you looked at the current climate of things and gone, I can see a way I'm going to approach filmmaking? Or are you looking at it like, I have no idea what I'm going to do?
Right. Well, like I said, I was still in my studies when this all started, and we've been in and out of lockdown a couple of times since then. Um, Obviously, but I finished university sort of start of summer. My summer was taken up because I was moving house, so we had to renovate a house, as you do. So that sort of window of opportunity that we could have, where lockdown was over and it was just like, everything was sort of not back to normal, but you were allowed to go out and mix and do things like that was allowed. That window of opportunity where you could have made films, I missed that because I was busy doing a house. And then since then, I got a job working in an Amazon warehouse because it was the only thing that I could look at and say, okay, that's not going to go away because of coronavirus, unless I catch it, obviously. But for me, it's sort of one thing that has changed is definitely, like you said, like it's made me appreciate just how much we could have done before all this happened. So that's a big thing. So I've like before lockdown 3 happened, I was thinking, okay, a few weeks into January, I'm gonna leave my job and I'm gonna just spend 2 or 3 months just going full balls to the wall, filmmaking stuff. And then obviously lockdown 3 happened, so forget that. Yeah, but it's definitely realised how much opportunity that there is out there. Not even necessarily on a professional paid level, but even just the freedom of being able to message someone that who's relatively close by, and you can meet up and you can work on a project immediately. It's made me appreciate that freedom much more. But in a positive way, it's also made me sort of not reevaluate, but it's also forced me to look into different avenues of storytelling, because I'm very much like, I'm very story focused on films and stuff. Like, obviously, when you write a script, you write it with sort of the shots in mind, or how it's going to play out on the screen. But when that was taken away, that sort of ushered me into thinking more about writing things in more of a like a novel format, which then opened up a whole new avenue, because writing for a script, for a film or TV script, is much different to writing for a book. And I think that's one thing that I've benefited from massively, is the ability to sort of focus on the depth and the world building of whatever story it is that I'm writing, rather than just thinking about what shots I can or can't do with what equipment that I've got access to, or thinking about, I'm going to write this scene a certain way because I want to do this shot. When you take away the actual visuals of it, because we can't really gather together and shoot things anymore, it just forces you to sort of focus entirely on what is the best possible story for these characters or for this event. So that's something that I'd say is a massive benefit for me, being forced to working without the promise of production just allows you to focus entirely on the story that you're writing. And that's improved my writing ability tenfold. Like, I remember we again, I keep bringing back our third year film as reference because we both get it, but like a lot of the scenes in that film were written to sort of they were written to make the visuals happen. A lot of them were. So when you take that away, it just opens up a whole new set of doors for writing, and it's maybe enjoy writing again. It's maybe use my imagination much more. It's even made me go into different avenues. Like, I had an idea for a short film when I was on a walk in the Peak District somewhere, because I saw like a cool set of woods, and I was like, oh, that's like a cool little scene. And I thought, oh, what could I do there? And I was like, oh, okay, I've got this idea. And then sort of wrote that down as a short film idea. We got sent back into lockdown 2, and I was like, well, I can't make that anymore. But I was like, I still kind of like this little thing I've made. So then I just completely just forgot about making it into a film, and just built a whole thing that started with that, just seeing this little grass clearing in a forest somewhere. and I forgot what I was talking about. Gone off on too many tangents. But yeah, I saw, that thing started. That I started writing that
Yeah.
story purely to necessitate shooting something in that little patch of grass that I saw that I thought looked cool. Took that away, and now I can focus on the story, and it's turned into a huge thing. And like a few weeks ago, I spent like a week straight every night studying maps and geography and stuff, so I could draw my own map for this world that I've somehow created from just this small patch of grass that I saw in real life. Take away the promise of actually making that, and you just focus on the story, and it's bloomed into a whole big thing. Like, it's just, yeah. I don't know if that had made any sense. I'm very sorry.
No, I get you.
I feel like I've just like talked you into a mind hole.
I was trying to follow along.
Well, I'll
No,
summarize it again, so just so you don't have to rewind and watch it again. Basically, the biggest thing that's changed for me is it's changed the way that I write, because before, when you're writing a script and you know it's for a film, you know it's for a TV show, whatever, you're always got in the back of your mind, you're thinking about what it's going to look like, how you're going to shoot it, can you afford this, who's going to play this, do you have the equipment to do X, Y, and Z. When you strip all that away, you just let yourself run with whatever idea you had, and it creates a lot more variance in the ideas that you have. And I think that's something that's definitely benefited me as a writer. And I think, I think that's probably the biggest gain that I've had from this whole situation. Not that there's been many gains.
See, what I found interesting is you obviously you've mentioned to me about this story which has just been blooming in your head, and you've literally gone out and you've got this whole map pictured in your head. But you hadn't mentioned to me that the reason why you started that is because you looked at one particular shot and went, I could film something there.
Yeah.
Because that's how I come up with a lot of concepts, is I look at one particular thing and I'm like, how can I use that in a shot? Or I look at, like, say, a location, like a corridor. I literally looked at a corridor and went, I could do a really cool one shot in that.
Yeah.
And then that turned into an idea. But what I've found is I'll start with there's a list of ideas I've got, and realistically, they're never going to be made, because either one, it's just not something people would enjoy to watch. Like, it's something which makes sense in my head, but trying to put it on paper and on film just wouldn't work. But I've got this list of ideas, and some of them came to fruition literally because I looked at, say, like a book, not any particular book. I just looked at a book and went, and it made me think about, a story and arcs, or, like the process that went into whatever. And it's a weird little skill, I think. I don't know if I'd say that it's a skill, but it's a weird little process. Yeah. It's thinking, I can look at something and then create a whole, like, 30-page script based off the fact I looked at this thing very, very briefly. And I find that quite interesting. But then it also means that when it comes to trying to create this, like this thing, because for my second year project, so my film I made in second year, because it was based off this one particular idea I'd had, and the rest of the story just sort of followed along, it got to the part where I made sure that particular idea was exactly how I pictured it in my head. It was exactly right. And the rest of the film just sort of happened, it was fine. But this one shot was perfect in my head. And it did make me look back and go, why did I focus so much on that one shot? Because it's literally the opening sequence. And it's not even that impressive.
I
think it took about 20 takes to get right. Whereas other things, it was like 3 takes later. I'm like, yeah, so it'll do. It's fine.
Is this the door closing in Never Alone?
Yeah. Well, it's
fridge,
the
yeah.
fridge
Oh, fridge
opens.
opens. That's it.
The
Yeah,
fridge opens.
Yeah.
The fridge opens, covers the
Yeah.
frame, and then because realistically, what we could have done is just cut. You just do a transition or like a seamless cut. It's fine. Like no one would have noticed. But in my head, I was like, no, it needs to be smooth. Like this character needs to appear, and then the rest of this thing is just. I'd rather not think about it. But that is quite a nice transition, I think, in terms of what do you think is the highest number of takes for one particular shot? And what do you think it's like? Who do you think is responsible?
How many takes did we do of the one shot in our 30th film?
I think we did about 7, didn't we?
Oh, okay, never mind then. Because in my head it felt like we did 1,000, but I could not say, because I know that some particular shots in films are quite elaborate and probably take a lot of takes. I don't know. I'd hazard to guess somewhere between like 200 to 300 maybe, if that's the record we're going for.
Okay, right.
Am I under or over?
Well, you know the infamous thing of Stanley Kubrick. He would constantly push for another take and another take and another take, to the point. I think it was The Shining where Jack Nicholson he started to just go insane from the amount of takes they were doing because he wanted perfection. The record number is 342
takes.
But what makes it even more hilarious is it's Charlie Chaplin. So it's a silent film. And I just find that incredible. I think after take like 20, I think for me to have like 18, 20 takes on one shot, I'm like, that's too much time spent on this. If it's not working, change it up. Like if you can't get that shot within about 10 attempts, because it's just not realistically, it doesn't go beat by beat, change it. It's not going to work, and you're going to spend too much time trying to get it right. But 342
That's
takes.
a strong-minded fellow who's calling that.
It's ridiculous. And apparently it was because it was Chaplin and a young girl in the scene. And I don't know the exact reasons behind it, but he was just never happy with it. And obviously at that point, it's not like they could just, like watch it back and be like, oh no, actually it's not too bad. They were filming on actual film, which was fairly expensive, and they did 300 plus takes.
I didn't even think about that, actually. That's mad when you think about that.
Because for a bit of context, an SD card, which can hold 64 gigabytes, you can get that for about £10, something like that. That'll set you out for like a day. You could probably get quite a lot of stuff on that. But for film, that's very expensive. Like even today, because who is it? Nolan. He loves shooting an IMAX, and that's done on actual film, and it's so expensive.
Count ourselves lucky that if we want to do 343 takes, 42 takes,
342,
then we could do that on an SD card. But imagine if you had to. Imagine being the guy who has to go to like the budgeting, whoever's in charge of the budget, and be like, "Excuse me, can you order some more filming, please? Charlie's not happy with it." Like, how have you...
Imagine the poor slate guy.
yeah. No. The slate guy would be happy. It's keeping him in work for a bit longer. He's collecting those hours.
Well, to be fair, would they even need to slate it? Because there's no audio to sync.
Probably not.
No idea.
Imagine being the poor guy who's got to get that reel of film out. Obviously, back in those days, they had to manually slice the film to cut things together.
God,
Imagine being the guy they've got this big reel of film that's just full of the same take. He's got to go through and he's got to find it. He's like, okay.
Surely you just go all the way to the end, wouldn't you? It's like surely the last one.
Imagine doing 342 takes on film and then deciding that number 132 was the best one.
but it's not been slated
Yeah.
either. So you've got to go through and watch all 132 of them. God, I that just blows my mind, because yeah, like I say, like by take 20, that's too much for me. For like, okay, I can understand obviously in like a big budget film if you've got this idyllic shot in your head, and you like, it's one of the big set pieces for the whole picture. I can understand wanting to do a ridiculous amount of takes, but yeah, like I think once you've hit 100 takes and it's not gone right, I feel like something has gone horribly wrong with you. Like, yeah, I don't think it's going to go well.
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah.
Well, that kind of, but not really, leads us into the final act of our podcast, because believe it or not, we're actually just under an hour so far.
Oh damn.
What do you say we call it? Should we call the segment "Question of the Week"? Topic
Yeah,
of the
go on then.
Question of the Week. Question of the Week.
Question of the week.
Episode 2 will have a graphic, but right now, just Question of the Week, presented by George Hilton.
Oh god, is it me? Okay. Right. My question of the week is, what... See, I've got two, so we can either answer both, or we can decide which one we want to answer.
Well, I suppose if they're vaguely connected, you could have like a 2-part question, 1A, 1B.
Well, I mean, my answers would technically be connected to some degree, but... So, the first one is, what is the first film / franchise that you remember just falling in love with? Like, what is that one where you think about it and it's like, that is what got me into watching movies? For me, it's Harry Potter, obviously. And then the second one was, what got you into making films? Because for me, it was watching the behind the scenes of the Harry Potter films. Because when I was younger, I'd love watching the behind the scenes because I'd find them so interesting. My mum would sit there and she's like, "Oh yeah, put the bloopers on." I'm like, "No, I want to watch behind the scenes." I'm like 8 years old. I'm like, I want to see how they made it. And then it was watching the Harry Potter behind the scenes where there's no spells there. It's just people flicking around these sticks. And they're just screaming Expelliarmus at the top of their lungs. And I just looked at that and went, this is what I want to do as a career.
Yeah, I can see why. Like, being able to take just, if you think about the act of like casting a spell in Harry Potter, if you take that out of the world of cinema, that's just like a nerd like me with a stick going, "Hecha!" But then you put that through the process of cinema, and it becomes this epic thing that's like iconic in itself.
Well, you had the music, you had the sound effects, you had the lights, you had all the visuals.
Like when Harry Potter goes in is it number 4? No, number 3, I think. When he's like Expecto Patronum, and he like saves Sirius from the demons. I remember that's one thing. That's one moment from Harry Potter when I'm like, I was sat there, I was like, whoa.
I remember seeing. I think that's the first one I saw in the cinemas. And I just remember coming out and being terrified by the Dementors. I was transfixed. It was great. Like, yeah, it's one of those things where on set, because we've both been on set, and it's like, trying to explain to someone what it is you've got in your head, and then sort of comparing that to the raw footage, doesn't. They don't exactly go hand in hand. It's when you take that raw footage and you show them what you're trying to explain, that's where the magic is. Because, like you say, with Harry Potter, it's literally just a guy holding a bit of wood and just screaming Expecto Patronum. Whereas then you take into a fact that they had, like, a soundstage, they had all the lights, they had the camera at the perfect position, then you had all the Dementors spiraling, you had the Patronus coming out, and you've got all the the effects and all that. And then when you literally put that side by side with the raw footage, they're not even in the same ballpark. But
it's like incredible just to see.
It's that thing of I just love watching the comparisons. Like you get the behind the scenes, and then you see the actual scene. They're literally played side by side. I'm like, this is why I'm a nerd, because I like this kind of stuff. I love just sitting there and watching how things are
Yeah.
made, because then I'm like, oh, I'm going to nick that idea. And I won't even lie, I have nicked some of the
Oh
ideas.
no, you just outed yourself now. It's going to be on the front
Well,
page of
that's
the news tomorrow. George Hilton outed on podcast for stealing.
I feel like I feel like if that's going to make the news, then it's a really slow day. But
Mate, if it
yeah,
makes
it's
news, then good,
like
because there's no such thing as bad publicity, is there?
no bad publicity. But yeah, it's when we were when we were doing our third year project, because we you directed, I did camera, and it was sort of a thing between us. We'd bounce ideas off each other, and we had a very limited amount of time to film. I think it was 3 scenes, and then we just sort of came to the agreement of we could just do it in one take, because that's kind of cool. And it's the idea of, if it was just me on my own, I'd be like, I don't want to do that. Like, I don't know if the director would agree with me, or I don't know if I trust my camera operator. Whereas, again, in university, you get to experiment. There's no repercussions, really. But it's the fact that we could bounce ideas off each other, and we could learn essentially on the spot. And obviously, then we've taken from films we've loved growing up, or like TV shows, or you've seen something, you've taken that, and you're like, oh yeah, I'll use that idea, I'll use that concept. And that's what I find great about this industry, because everyone's just stealing from each other.
Yeah, there's no such thing as true originality. Everything's a copy of a copy of a copy. And that's fine, by the way. That's like, unless
Oh
you
yeah.
find, like, unless you are like one in like a billion, your idea's probably been done before in some sort of level. And again, that's fine. Like, what are we now? We're like 100 and something years into the film era. Film started being made properly at the start of like the 1900s, or end of 1800s actually. But
Yeah,
like,
it was like 1890s,
yeah,
wasn't it?
so
Yeah.
like, but film as we know it, that's sort of like 1930 onwards ish, maybe 20s onwards, like as we know it today. Before that, it doesn't really look too familiar. But we're like, however, like we're 100 and something years into film being a thing. There's only so many original ideas that you can have in the world. So it's cool being able to see behind the scenes and see how like films borrow from each other, and just seeing like just seeing the process of how, like, one thing I watched. I think it might be Christmas Eve. I was watching this because I was doing some work on the house, as you do on Christmas Eve, and I binge watched all the behind the scenes of the Star Wars prequels.
Oh god, what, the blue screens?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of blue screens in there, but a lot of it was just the camera going around with George Lucas, and it was just him. Most of it was just him having conversations with people about what they're going to do about this and that. And I just listened to it because I was busy doing something. I was listening to it, and I was like, it's just awesome just to see that happen. And a franchise as big as Star Wars, say what you want about the prequels, but the franchise as big as Star Wars, and it's all the biggest decisions and all those iconic moments. They start in conversations between people sat around a desk. I think that's cool. Yeah, in summary, I understand
Well,
the
it's
viewpoint behind the scenes.
yeah, it's like, if George Lucas hadn't have made Star Wars, then we wouldn't have half of the stuff we have today.
Nope.
Because obviously, so many directors and writers nowadays who are big names in the industry, a lot of them were inspired by watching Star Wars for the first time as a
Yep.
kid. And it's just mad to think that those films, like, they're very, if you watch them now, safe to say they haven't totally held up as
No,
well.
yeah, they've not aged particularly well, but
They haven't aged very well, but the fact that, when were the, it was the 70s.
1973, I want to say the first Star Wars came out, A New Hope.
I think it was 70s, 80s whenever they came out. But it was revolutionary.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Also,
was it because Yeah, to
1977,
do the
the first Star Wars came out.
late 70s,
Yeah,
early 80s. So was it like 83 is when like Return of the Jedi came out as
yeah,
well?
something like that.
Something like that. But it was like to do the ships in space.
It hadn't been done
They
before.
they had to. It hadn't been done before, and they obviously did it with miniatures and stuff. But what I find is a great little fact is the reason why Luke Skywalker's lightsaber suddenly turns from blue to green in Return of the Jedi is because one of the first scenes they shot was against the blue sky, and it wouldn't have shown up, so they had to make it green, and that is why the green lightsaber exists.
And that has spawned a whole new thing of different lightsaber colors and what
Yeah.
meaning is attached to each color and all that stuff, and all the lore behind how
Oh god,
lightsabers get
so
there.
much.
All that spawned from, well, we had to make it stand out from the background, so we made it green, and that's suddenly become a topic of controversy and debate amongst Star Wars fans for decades after, and also, like, I think Disney have retconned some of the lore to describe why different lightsabers have different colors and stuff like that. Like, all that from a little decision to make it pop off the background, and that's cool.
Well, I think it in oh, is it Empire Strikes Back or whatever. You've got when the Death Star blows up for the first time. It's red and gold squadrons, and originally it was meant to be red and blue. But I think similarly to the blue contrasting with the sky, the blue wouldn't have worked with whatever it was they were trying to shoot against, so they had to make it gold. And then I actually only found this out a couple of days ago. Is in Rogue One, you see Blue Squadron, and all of them are wiped out, which is why they are then not in the original trilogy.
That's cool.
So I thought that's just a really cool little Easter
That's a
egg.
good little nugget.
Um, but it is one of those things that back then they had to find ways around it. They had to be so creative with how they approached filmmaking, and I'd like to think we also had some pretty ingenious ideas as students. Not because we had these magnificent shots planned; it was because we didn't have the budget. We couldn't turn around and say, "Right, we'll hire a stuntman to do this, and we'll get explosions in the background." It was we need to be clever with how we do things because otherwise, there's
Yeah,
going to be nothing to
yeah.
watch.
Like, necessity is the mother of creation, and if you have to get something done, and you've only got a certain amount of tools to do it, then you're going to find a new way to get it done. It's like when fucking Apollo 13 went up into, I think it was Apollo 13, they went up into space, and their oxygen CO2 filter thing broke, and they had to find a way to fix it with using nothing but what they had on board, and they created a new thing. It's like that. A bit of an obscure reference, um, but if you watch the film Apollo
It
13,
works.
you'll understand it perfectly, and I recommend you do because that's a great film. Tom Hanks and the guy from A Mouse and Men, Mice and Men, George from A Mouse and Men, he's in it. Kevin Bacon as well. Great film. Go and watch it.
I was going to say Kevin Bacon's it. I can't remember who plays George. I know it's
I know his
Oh,
face,
is
but
it?
not the name.
Oh, is it John Malkovich who plays Lenny? It's not, is it?
I could not tell you.
I don't know what's his name. It is John Malkovich who plays Lenny. Gary Sinise? I don't know. Where is him?
But yeah. Getting back to the question. For me, yeah, obviously the first films or franchise that I watched, and I was like, I love it. It's Lord of the Rings for me every single day of the week, like, because my brother was a big fan of it, and our family was a big fan of it, so we used to go and watch them in the cinema. I think maybe I have to get my mum on the podcast one day to confirm this, but I'm pretty sure we saw Return of the King 3 times in the cinema, back to back to back.
Oh, wow.
I think we saw it once, and then the next day we went to the cinema again and watched it again. And I think we did that 3 times. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but because I was only Return of the King came out in 2003, I want to say, so I would have been like 7 or 8, no, 6 or 7. But yeah, and also to answer the second part of the question, when when film became like something I wanted to do, when I wanted my life's work to be film, that came for me I'd say it was always kind of there, but I never pursued it because it was all like I was always sort of, I won't say I was ushered into a path, but I'd sort of ended up walking a path of taking like a sensible college course, and I studied engineering for 3 years at college, and I did it for 1 year at uni. I just sort of did that because that was around me where I grew up. A huge amount of like the work that was there was on like oil refineries and stuff that were just a few miles from my village. So a huge amount of people that I knew, they would go to school, go to college, get a NVQ in engineering or something, get an apprenticeship on the oil refineries, and that would be their career because it was like a safe path to having quite a handsomely paid career. And I just sort of went down that because that's what you do when you don't really think about your life choices. And then I went to uni, and university engineering was like a different level to college engineering. Like again, at my college, they sort of pushed you towards going to like apprenticeships and stuff, so they made it quite easy for you to do well. Whereas at uni, they make it quite difficult for you to do well. So I was like having a bit of an existential crisis, and I remember sitting to myself thinking about what I actually want to do, like what I want my life's work to be, because I don't know if I have it actually, but I just done an equation. I've told the story a few times. I've probably told you before, but I spent 16 hours on an equation, and the answer was 3. Like that's it, just 3. It was a completely like theoretical equation, and I spent 16 hours on it, lost an inch of my hairline, stressed out, and the answer was 3. And I was like, I don't want my life's work to be this, because it's just so unrewarding. And I just remember thinking back and just thinking about all the times in my life where I've had like issues and not been happy or whatever. My escape has always been films and stories and losing myself in like other worlds. I think that's why I loved Lord of the Rings so much as a kid, because you just lose yourself in this world. So I just looked back at that and I was like, I want to make films that can impact someone else's life the way that the films that I've watched have impacted my life. So that's why I wanted to go into film as a career and as my life's work. I'm very much captivated by the practical side of it, like we mentioned with your part. But the tipping point for me was, I wanted to make films that could have an impact on someone else's life the way that, say, Lord of the Rings, for example, had an impact on my life. Life story complete. Yeah.
Well, yeah, there you go.
That's my answer.
Yeah.
So, you probably got more than you bargained for with that question, but
It was meant to be a 30-second answer.
Well, mate, I'm just trying to string this podcast out so we could put some more adverts on it.
Yeah, there you go. Ad revenue. No, I do agree. Like one of the reasons I got into this industry is to create something that will hopefully inspire people in the way that Harry Potter inspired me. I'd literally go home from school having had a really crap day. I'd be like, I'll watch Harry Potter for the 5th time this month.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where you can just lose yourself in it, and that's one of the main attractions for me.
Yeah. It's like something about...
But then it also does mean that now I understand how film works. I can't watch a film without in my head trying to work out how they got a shot.
I was watching The Mandalorian with Holly a few weeks ago, and I started pointing out. Obviously, I knew this from before it was even released because I'd been keeping up. I'd seen it online, like the behind the scenes of how they do it in front of the LED screen.
What is it they call it? The I can't remember what they call it. That's going to annoy me.
But yeah, I knew that before. But then I was sitting there and I just started thinking about it. And I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. Then I was telling Holly about it. And I was like, oh, that's not actually real. That's a screen. That's a prop. And I was like pointing out where on the scene that it becomes like, obviously they have the combined LED screen with a real set in front. And I was like pointing out the line. I was like, you see right there, that's where it switches from real to fake. And she was like, shut up, you're ruining it.
It is the Mandalorian is one of those I'd love to just sit and talk about where I think the future of filmmaking is going, because Mandalorian is definitely, well, just Jon Favreau in general. he's one of those filmmakers where he just looks ahead of like, how can technology benefit my filmmaking? How can it help me tell a story? Because with Mandalorian, they could spend millions and millions of dollars building sets, or we could just make a set out of big LED screens and just make teeny tiny little versions of the set and just put them up against the screen, and it will just flow. And it's insane.
Yeah, it's
how it works.
like
It's
I remember
mad.
watching like a more in-depth video about it, and it was talking about like it's powered by Unreal Engine, I believe, the graphical bit
Unreal.
of the screen, and they were saying how if we want to change something, we can just we've got the 3D modeler on set, and if the director's like, I want that thing to be there, I want this to look like that, give him a few minutes, just adjust it on set, and then boom, it's straight there on the screen. And I think that's crazy, because I think about that in rewind 10 years, rewind 20 years, because say for example Lord of the Rings, bring it up again, I love Lord of the Rings, it's great, but if Peter Jackson was like, okay, I want Minas Tirith to actually look like this, there's like 40 or 50 people in the miniature effects department being like, we've just spent 2 months building this miniature and you want it to change. But it is now in 2021 or 2020 when that was filmed, you can just be like, excuse me mate, can you just change this to that? And he's like, oh yeah, no worries, give me 5 minutes, change it, boom, it's there on film. It's incredible.
Yeah. See, the thing is, again, that's another topic I love to talk about, is miniatures. Like Lord of the Rings blew my mind when I saw the miniature sets, because I was like, oh, they've obviously just, it's either a matte painting or it's on a green screen. No, they've just done forced perspective, and there's a miniature behind them.
Yeah, it's cool.
It's mad.
Another film did that is the original Blade Runner.
Yeah.
The downtown LA bit there, that's all miniatures, I believe, most of it. It's just kind of cool.
There's one which used miniatures. It's gonna bug me. I can't think of it. But there's a film where it used miniatures because, like, they exploded something, but obviously it was meant to be like a complex exploding.
Okay.
But when it was like filmed in slow motion, so if they'd done it all like on an actual complex and done loads of little explosions, it wouldn't have looked as good.
Yeah.
So they built a miniature and they put an actual explosive in it, blew it up and filmed it in slow-mo. And because obviously the explosion is relative to the structure, which is meant to be this big building, because they're both scaled correctly, when it's played out on a big screen, it looks insane. Yeah. And then you can put it against things where it's VFX and they've got, just the windows blow out with a bit of fire coming out there. You play them against each other and it's ridiculous. Like, using something which is I don't know, like the size of a dinner table in comparison to an actual set, and you can get so many amazing results.
Yeah, it's like again, Lord of the Rings. At the Helm's Deep, the Helm's Deep explosion was done the same way. When they blew up the wall, spoiler alert, the wall gets blown up. They did that for Helm's Deep. I think they had 3 different scale models of it. They had a small one for like explosion stuff, and then had like a medium one, and then had like a big miniature. And they filmed the explosion much the same way, and they had different size miniatures for different shots they wanted to get. Just cool. But anyway, before we go off on another tangent, because we're approaching the 1 hour 20 minute mark.
Oh Jesus! Right. Okay.
We'll call it an episode there. I think we've had some good conversation. To our viewer watching, maybe you could comment down below and be like, what's the first film franchise that you fell in love with? The first franchise that you fell in love with. There we go. Nailed it. And also, if
there's the weekly question for you guys.
Question: what's the film or the film franchise that made you fall in love with film or cinema? And if you are a filmmaker, why? What made you choose this career path? Because who in the right mind would want to be a filmmaker? Unless you had to be. Because you just couldn't stop yourself. I'm one of those, like, filmmaking isn't a job, it's what I have to do. It's my destiny. I'm the chosen one. Anyway, we'll wrap it up there. This has been the Mise-En-Sesh podcast,
right.
episode 1. Yeah, thank you for watching. I'm Elliot, he's George. It's the Mise-En-Sesh podcast. See you later.
Bye-bye.